Today's video is going to be a short one, mostly because the book itself is pretty short. I'm talking about Pandora by Anne Rice. This is the first book in the New Tales of the Vampires sub-series of the Vampire Chronicles, but continuity-wise, it is technically book number 6. It takes place right after the events of Memnoch the Devil. The story begins with David Talbot tracking down Pandora and asking her if she will tell her story. They meet in a cafe, he leaves with her a notebook and pen and says, write down your story if you're so inclined. And of course she does, because we have this book. As far as origin stories are concerned, it's a decent book. I wouldn't call it a great book, but it's decent. It's definitely not anything close to Interview with the Vampire or The Vampire Lestat. Those are still better books. And it's not really very long. I wouldn't even call it a novel. It's more about the size of a novella. In fact, it's only about 344 pages in mass market paperback form. And the font size in the book is a bit larger as well to accommodate more pages. It'd probably be closer to around 300 or a bit less than that if the font size was a bit smaller. The book is, as you might imagine, the story of Pandora from her childhood to modern day. The first half of the book, or a little over the first half, is pretty good, about the same quality, or not quite the same quality as the earlier origin stories, but definitely more detailed, same pace. It focuses on the important parts of her life, right? It doesn't go into too much detail, but there's enough, like all the parts where she encountered Marius, because she did encounter him multiple times before becoming a vampire by him, including once when she was a child, where, he was still human at that point, and she impressed him with her knowledge. Pandora was born in the time of Rome during the reign of Augustus. So she was a noble, a highborn Roman, and she witnessed and experienced things that were typical of the Roman populace back then. Stuff that was meant to harden you as a person and prepare you for the harsh realities of the world, such as the deadly arena battles or public executions, stuff like that. That kind of thing was considered a commonplace to take part in, as just part of daily life, part of entertainment, part of society, part of community. The pace in the book starts to pick up a little bit after it hits the point where she ends up in her 30s. I believe it's in her 30s, where she has to flee her house in Rome and hide elsewhere under a new identity, which is when she takes on the name of Pandora. She didn't originally have that name. She chose that name for herself after going into hiding. And it was during that time that she encountered Marius. This time, he was a vampire. It is at this point where my biggest gripe of the book is, because I feel like some points during this latter half that the pace was too quick and there wasn't enough to kind of slow it down. The pace changes drastically and I don't think it fits. There was way more focus on the human portion of her life versus the vampire portion of her life. And the only portions that she touched on were the ones involving Marius to some degree. So there's no other detail as to what she did in between those times, from her departure from Marius and when they separated to when they met the first time after that, and then to when they met again in our modern time. I don't know about anyone else, but personally I thought I would have loved to have seen some of that, and like how she came across her vampire companion and stuff like that. She only briefly glosses over this. I thought Pandora was an interesting character for the most part. It's something I would have loved to see, to read. And I feel like, I'm just guessing, but it feels to me like by that point the book was more of fulfilling an obligation to her publisher rather than something she wanted to write. I could be wrong, but it's way too jarring of a change, and it severely hampered my liking of the book. It could have been a 4-star book for me, but that really dragged it down considerably. I can't give it more than 3 stars as a result. I want to, but I'm not going to. There's not enough there, I think. There's not as much of a focus on the vampire aspects as I would have liked, which is what I like in a vampire novel. I love her descriptions of all the historical aspects and stuff, but as you guys know, I read vampire books for the vampires, and between a lack of that and the change in the pacing, and it just not quite as good as it could have been and as I was hoping it would be. But yeah, that's enough about Pandora by Anne Rice. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the book in the comments below. If you wish to see a written version of the review for this book at any point in time, you can feel free to go check out my Goodreads and Storygraph profiles listed in the description below. It will be there for your reading pleasure. And that's it for this week's video, guys. I will talk to you later. Bye!